This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. Welcome into episode number 131 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Noah Grant alongside Nick Maxon. Nick, it's a pleasure to have you here as always, as all of our listeners and viewers as well here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Joining us for the ride here, college hockey is back. Our first weekend is under the belt, but that's probably not the way I want to phrase that, but it's over. We get to talk about all things hockey here. We're just getting warmed up here on a Monday night. Maybe that's why I feel so weird, besides the fact that our show never really starts off that effectively. And I usually lead off the show. So there's your answer right there. But yes,
put me in, coach.
Yes, we're going to, speaking of coaching, we're going to talk about kind of recapping everything non-NCHC opening weekend, some scores, some things we noticed maybe around the Big Ten, around college hockey as a whole, just some kind of interesting tidbits that we might have noticed. Then we'll recap everything in the NCHC that we noticed related to those teams specifically, and the scores that we can see. St. Cloud State men, of course, back in action in St. Thomas, doing very well. We'll recap that series. Women's team, good weekend for them as well, looking very promising. Nick has some great info on that. And then we'll just lightly touch on the Minnesota Wild as well, too, as we head into the last week of preseason before the regular season opens. Extra ice session. We're actually going to circle back. Nick Maxon has info on this too. NCHC Media Day. The recap for that. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that in depth. But before all of that, we start as always with Center Ice View News and Notes in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Center Ice View News and Notes Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, Noah. This is the time of the year, if you're in the NHL, where your PTO is either you get a contract or you get released. And so these are some of those late signings, acquisition sort of deals. So we'll go through these kind of quick because there's not too many of them. Jackets defenseman, we're talking the Blue Jackets, Andrew Peeke getting his 3-year bridge extension, $2.75 million a season. Nice young defenseman, 24 years of age, 15 points in 82 games played. He's got 1 year left at the league minimum salary this year before his extension kicks in. So a good depth extension there for Columbus. I think any notable signings, this is a big one. Jake Allen in Montreal extended for 2 seasons, $7.7 million total with Montreal. This will begin next season. So again, he's still on the edge of his current deal. 32 years of age, 905 save percentage, 330 goals against average in 35 games played. Noah, this signing or this extension maybe doesn't happen if we're talking about another Montreal goaltender, Carey Price, but Montreal, I think if you had somebody that could, you're never going to fill the shoes of Carey Price, but if you're going to put a veteran goaltender out there that can give you a chance to win, Jake Allen, not a bad option.
You know what's interesting? The Montreal Canadiens at this point honestly kind of remind me of the Minnesota Wild in some senses. I mean, Jake Allen doesn't have the pedigree that Marc-Andre Fleury has, obviously, or Carey Price for that matter. But I think the Canadiens are preparing for the future a little bit, similar to how Minnesota is, knowing they've got a couple of young goalies in the pipeline. They're going to start looking at that position a little bit more intently, and knowing that they've got a veteran in right now, a younger person backing up for the Canadiens, and then a couple of guys in that pipeline, and just kind of the next 2 years are going to be an interesting mix where the veteran's going to take over, and then they're going to continue to address that position as the seasons evolve. Montreal has made it very clear that Jake Allen, at least for now, is going to be their guy until a better option comes available or someone develops accordingly. Tough. I mean, I would love to see Carey Price find a way back to the ice in some capacity, even if it's not this season. I still think if he can rehab appropriately, there's definitely more left in his game otherwise beyond his injury. But right now, Jake Allen's going to be the stopgap, and 2 years, $7.7 million. The 905 and 3.3 goals against is pretty misleading because Montreal was really crappy last year. So I like the signing, and Montreal, their issues don't stop at goaltending. Let's just put it that way.
No, it's been quite the fall from a Stanley Cup final appearance just 2 seasons ago that really honestly was sort of a catch fire at the right time. A couple of stars aligning for Montreal, and definitely have sort of hit the rebuild button pretty heavily. And so, like you said, this is more of a good way to try to buy some time. Right. And it's no offense to Jake Allen because he's a quality goaltender. There's no question about that. But you definitely get the sense that there's still more things in the works that are years in the making for Montreal as they continue to try to build back a championship contender. Speaking of championship contenders, the Toronto Maple Leafs. How about this? Rasmus Sandin agreed to a 2-year deal, $1.4 million a season. Yes, for those listening to the Steve Dangle podcast. Yes, I ripped that from them. I'm sorry.
Yes,
51. Yes, I did. 51 games played, 17 points for the 22-year-old Swede. So again, defenseman. So you're not expecting him to, kill the points category, but I would say dependable 7th D right now. I know they want him to develop more into, maybe bottom 4 role, but as for now, he's probably that 7th option. Continuing on, former Canadian Nathan Beaulieu is going to Anaheim after a PTO that got him a contract, 1 year, $850,000, 24 games with Winnipeg. Most recently, he was on injured reserve from Wolfsburg last season. So kind of a show me contract here for Beaulieu. And then Callan DeHaan to Carolina again off for a PTO, 1 year, $850,000, which I believe is the league minimum this year. 31 years of age, 8 points with Chicago last year. So game definitely regressing from his days as a New York Islander. But at the end of the day, injuries happen. And I think players, or I should say teams, are they're okay to take some of these low risk type contracts because, again, one guy goes down, and granted, Carolina's defensive acquisition this year was Brent Burns, but you can never have too much depth at any position. And so Calvin DeHaan gets a contract, he gets a league minimum, and Carolina gets some depth and some insurance there in the back end.
Yeah, certainly does. A lot of good signings here. And like you mentioned last week, for us to really kind of find out some of these guys' fates here, none of which, of course, include Marco Rossi, the Minnesota Wild, which we'll get to in, of course, the main portion of the show. So
100%. Some positive news, right? With some maybe not so good news, right? The Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, the state of Florida, especially Southwest Florida. And this one here is near and dear to my heart. One of my better vacation spots, a lot of sentimental memories down in the Fort Myers area, Sanibel Island. They donated $2 million to the Hurricane Ian relief efforts. Again, anytime an organization granted $2 million in today's day and age is a drop in the bucket, but still $2 million that they're giving away to try to help the efforts down there in the state of Florida. So a nice gesture there from the Tampa Bay Lightning organization that, oftentimes gets kind of slipped under the rug, and I want to make sure they get their recognition for that, because they certainly didn't have to do that. But again, that money can go quite a long ways of use to, in the right appropriations.
Yes, very much so.
So Hockey Canada, we have to continue to talk about Hockey Canada because they make us. I know. We'll make this quick though. And this is the part where the sort of audit, right? The ongoing audit was because Hockey Canada does get government subsidies, again, from the government of Canada. Did they use these upfront funds essentially inappropriately? What sounds like they did, right? There was a trust that was used with player fees, essentially, and they were diverted to a second fund for sexual assault claims, right? It was set to be dissolved in March of 2020, which was listed in the documents as intended division date, but in late 2018 and early 2019, Hockey Canada and its members went to court to alter the terms of the trust, ensuring that it would be kept in place till 2039, which I think is a pretty self-damning kind of statement, basically saying that you are expecting more of this, and so therefore you have to keep something in reserves for these kind of things. Now, Yeah, I think no, I may be a bit off kilter when I say this. If you have a legal fund set aside to handle things, I get it. But when you have it coming from players' fees and specifically to sexual assault things, it just doesn't have the same bell, right? It doesn't ring the same.
Yeah, not that Hockey Canada's bell has been ringing very nicely right now. I would say it's akin to a certain bell in Philadelphia, which ironically enough has its own issues and players lying like snow angels on the ice. But beyond that, yeah, no, it's just the bad news continues. And I wonder, and USA Hockey has had its fair share of things, maybe a little bit, probably closer to a decade ago. But nonetheless, the future of Hockey Canada, man, you really start to wonder as we move forward here.
And you kind of wonder how many bells does it need to ring before more sweeping changes are due. And at least from what we've seen as of the last, almost 12 months, doesn't seem like there were any major changes, at least on the way currently, but these things are dynamic. These things keep developing, and we'll certainly keep everybody up to date here on the Huskies Warmer Nose podcast as they develop. Speaking of developing, right? This was something we covered last week. Russian players apparently were not going to be welcome to the Czech Republic for those NHL, essentially international games. They've been cleared for those in Prague. So the Czech government dropping its attempt to ban Russian players on the rosters of both the San Jose Sharks and the Nashville Predators. This is coming from NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly. So this includes Nashville forward Yakov Trenin, and San Jose also has Alexander Barabanov along with Evgeny Smechnikov, who was on a tryout agreement, a PTO. So I don't know. I guess we kind of had a feeling that it was going to go that way, but again, it's dropped. And I think just today, Nashville's over playing Bern of Switzerland. So it seems to be an issue with the past at the moment.
Yeah, actually, 32 Thoughts for each talked about it really well, and talked about how both sides can be right. You can understand the animosity, right, from 100%. Czech government, and understand, obviously we're not over there and, in the middle of the situation. And he also mentioned the Iron Curtain even back in the day and feeling that sort of oppression too. So, I mean, you can see it both ways. But I hope that, the agreement that the NHL has had and that the officials have had, ultimately ends up in good hockey games, because that's the goal, right? For the players to get over there safely to have really good hockey games and help grow the game. So it seems like that's going to happen, and hopefully they're two really good hockey games and everyone is able to travel and accept that appropriately. Speaking of accepting things appropriately, Nick,
oh boy,
the Seattle Kraken have unveiled their new mascot. Disney had a helping hand. No, I'm kidding. The new mascot's name is Bowie, and Twitter has reacted. It is inspired by the Fremont Troll, which is a sculpture beneath a bridge in Seattle that has been a landmark of the city for the last 32 years. And yes, it is literally a Disney troll. No joke.
Quite literally. So when does Philadelphia come to town, and when does Gritty and this guy get together? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out, is it even a guy? I mean, I don't
know.
Yeah, I do not know.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know either.
That's okay.
But Seattle did win their opener the first day that the mascot was unveiled. So. Well, then again,
that's gambler's error. That's so Minnesota sports-esque of you.
I say then again, to be fair, I feel like Philadelphia won theirs too, and it's only a matter of time then before Chuck Fletcher makes the move, right?
Oh boy, it was just false foreshadowing is all it was.
Well, let's talk about false foreshadowing here. Juraj Slafkovsky, Montreal Canadiens' first overall pick from this past draft. His preseason play has been, quote, a little underwhelming.
That's quite the statement.
Yeah, general manager Kent Hughes said it's no guarantee that he will make the Habs out of camp. And I thought this quote was interesting enough to leave it in. He said, "We've got to do what's right for him. If we do what we said when we drafted him, we weren't looking for the best 18-year-old. We were looking for the best NHL player down the road. And I don't think we do that without making the best decision for him. Whether it's the popular decision or not, we're going to believe what is right." And he will likely end up in the AHL if he doesn't crack the roster. 6'3", 238-pound winger. Of course, last season was in Finland's top professional league. So this is interesting. They said he's kind of been underwhelming, hasn't really produced in the exhibition games. Looked really good in the rookie camp. Was probably Montreal's best player in that group there. I mean, it's going to take some time. Do you like the approach from Montreal?
Well, There's a sliver of truth to this. There's also a little bit of in between the lines juiciness to this, right?
Yeah.
Because they're playing tonight, and all the Twitter feeds that I follow, again, national folks who cover it, essentially, I think Slavkovsky got what I think was this was a message by Kent Hughes, kind of in between the lines. That's like, hey, we know you can do better. Let's see it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, to the actual direct quote, right? It's 100% the right thing to do. I know as fans and maybe casual fans, and maybe even circles around the NHL. I mean, look what Shane Wright. I think this is a good kind of diatribe to look at it as. Thought he was going to be the number 1 pick, slipping to 4.
Right.
Apparently, some off ice conversations, and we don't know exactly, but he dropped to 4.
Right.
And he's going to Seattle. It sounds like he's probably going to start with their National Hockey League club. So, right. And the natural instinct for us right now is the first overall pick. He's the best player in the draft, and he's going to be making an NHL debut with the big club right away, and he's going to be a head turner. That doesn't always happen. And at the end of the right, and at the end of it too, this is if Slavkovsky, isn't ready, then you don't force especially a young player with all that promising talent, right, into a situation that is not going to help him develop and be, like Kent Hughes said, the best player that he can be down the road. And look and honestly, Montreal has the time. We talked about it with Jake Allen and where the Montreal Canadiens are. Again, they were bottom of the league last year. It's not like one player is going to turn around a franchise. It's going to take more moves, more signings, more draft classes. So they don't need to rush them. But what they do need is if they're going to maximize their rebuild a couple years down the road, then if the AHL is the best thing for them right now, then so be it. You don't ever want to put a player in a position where he's going up into competition where he's not ready. So whether it's he does end up making a last second impression or whether they really truly believe he spends time in the American Hockey League, doesn't mean he can't get called up, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like these things are permanent decisions. But if it is, he starts, in Laval, then that would be best for him, and nobody should be panicked about that.
Yeah, it's going to be what it's going to be. And, how about a player that's on the other side where he's so good he might be playing multiple positions here? Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs is expected to try out a role as a defenseman, as a situational D-man in potential, for example, late game situation. He's been taking reps on the back end during training camp. He's welcomed the opportunity. Sheldon Keefe has talked about this, seeing if he can handle that two-way specialty, which is actually something that is a part of his game that really goes under the radar.
Actually.
Obviously. So Mitch Marner as a potential D-man in the late stages of the third period, can you see it?
Yes, actually, because let's take the title out of the situation, right? And hockey really has sort of evolved to where the positional things aren't quite as meaningful as they used to be, right?
Right.
And again, I think the key word here is situational, right? And again, you're about the point. In terms of a hockey IQ player, in terms of anticipating the play and being away from the puck and knowing where to be and just kind of reading things, there's not a lot of better people in the National Hockey League at trying to be a little bit of a step ahead than Mitch Marner. And so it's almost like Toronto's trying to figure out a way to get his vision and get his IQ on the ice during those times where maybe they need to get ahead, or dare I say, maybe trying to hold a lead. And at the end of the day, doesn't this smell like Toronto is pushing all their chips in the middle of the table here? I mean, honestly, a little bit. That's the GM, that's the players. They know that they've been given kind of a couple of get out of jail free cards. And at the end of the day, if something doesn't go right for them, especially in a playoff run, there are going to be major changes. I know we've said that a couple times, but you do really feel like the end of the road is this season if they don't have some sort of breakthrough in the playoffs. And so if you can get your best players out there to do some different things, but be impactful, why not?
How about John Tavares taking the draw with Austin Matthews and William Nylander, and then Michael Bunting as the extra player, and then Morgan Riley and Mitch Marner on the back end to tie a hockey game? That's scary.
well, I was going to say, as an opposing coach, who do you cover? You can't, right? It's everybody has a shot capability. You have the eyes and the vision of Mitch Marner. That's nasty, right?
Do you think that if a goaltender along with 5 other NHLers stood in a semicircle right in front of the goaltender around the crease, do you think a puck would be able to get through?
Yes.
Imagine Austin Matthews teeing up on that one.
Imagine if it was Shea Weber if he was still healthy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, boy.
Well, let's talk about someone who knows how to score. Our last little tidbit before a couple of injuries here. This is just kind of fun here because how Minnesota will this end? I want to know. Kirill Kaprizov, according to a lot of media outlets, multiple sources, that anticipated to be a top 5 to top 6 scorer in the National Hockey League this upcoming season. Do you see it? How does that projection look? I believe he finished 5th last year, if I'm not mistaken, 5th or 4th. I can't remember.
I don't think he was that high, was he?
Yeah, he was. He had 108 points. I mean, think about it. Johnny Gaudreau was second and he had 115. So,
well,
I can look it up right now.
Look it up because I don't think he was that high. I think he was 7th or 8th.
Can we bet on it?
What are we betting?
I don't know. What do you want to bet? You're the lawyer guy.
Oh, no. You just keep tweeting a picture of that of me.
So I have the answer here for you.
Yes.
Kirill Kaprizov was 5th. He was 2 points ahead of Austin Matthews and 2 points behind Leon Draisaitl.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby. It's not as crazy as it sounds. I think a lot of people I think it comes down to 2 things. I think people are doubting it because they're thinking the team's going to regress because Kevin Fiala's gone.
Yeah.
And so somehow they're thinking, well, then that means Kaprizov is going to go down too.
Well, they weren't even on the same line. And like the other thing is the other thing is this: Kaprizov, no offense to the Wild, and I think they're getting better. Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, youth infusions. Kaprizov, unlike the other guys that we mentioned on that list, even right there, not a lot of supporting cast, to be truly honest. Like,
no, and he's one of those guys where you can put him with anybody and he still will be successful. So I do think it's possible. I know that I think a lot of it, the Wild just get written off because they just have never had that scary. And I think even with Kaprizov, there's still doubters. But he is a workhorse, and after that playoff performance, he's hungry. I think the team is going to be just fine this year. They may take a very small step back point-wise, but Kaprizov will be fine. How
scary is it to say, like, the Minnesota Wild for the 2nd consecutive year may have a score in the top 5 in the National Hockey League?
What dimension am I living in, and what episode of Family Guy is it? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but you better pinch yourself because I think I'm dreaming.
Seriously.
Well, someone who will be dreaming very well will be General Manager Bill Guerin, knowing Cam Talbot out 5 to 7 weeks with an upper body injury for the Senators. I will say, by the way, you know what? Actually, we'll leave it for the Minnesota Wild. Philip Gustafson, actually like it. He's played well. I've been impressed. Taylor Hall week to week with an upper body injury for the Bruins. Brock Besser will miss the start of the season after hand surgery for the Canucks. That's tough for them. Lastly, Maple Leafs, John Tavares will be out almost a month with an oblique strain. And welcome into the main portion of the show, episode number 131. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant. For those who are wondering or looking on the YouTube feed, I am at home actually here. I have a nursing clinical. How about this? Small story here, Nick. So I am giving flu shots, influenza shots tomorrow in my hometown. And it's funny because it's a random draw for our clinical. So just because I'm from my hometown, which happens to be close by, doesn't mean that you're going to get it. I mean, you can get any clinical site that you get. So I got this flu clinic that's in my hometown, which is nice. So I got to come home and see the parents. Just so happens that Todd Grant, who happens to be my father, informed me that he happens to be getting a flu shot tomorrow.
Oh boy.
So if I don't
write this, can't write the script.
So if I don't return to the Huskies Warming House podcast,
okay, we'll carry it forward for you.
That's a difficult task trying to pull that wagon out of that ditch. With that being said, how about the wagon that is rolling non-NCHC opening weekend here? College hockey around, of course, are recording on Monday as well. Kind of a product of this as well too. So
right.
For those who are curious, by the way, we are going to be recording on Saturday night next week because the men do not play, women do for St. Cloud. So we had a nice little recap for you as well. But looking around the college hockey world, I think maybe let's start with the first one that everyone's curious about. Golden Gophers, Minnesota. Look good on the front end. Some really good offensive talent. Goaltending might be an issue.
Boy. So it's early. That's the good news.
Tell Wisconsin fans that.
Yeah. But honestly, like, I mean, you don't have to have, I mean, let's bring back Jack LaFontaine in the conversation. And I don't mean to disrespect Jack LaFontaine. That's not what this is at all. But, you know, he gets plucked to go to Carolina, doesn't go well, gets sent to the minors, and then he was cut from the team, and now he's end up actually, I believe he was on waivers this morning. If he clears, he goes to Syracuse in the Tampa organization. So you can get away with a mediocre goaltender. And I shouldn't say mediocre, but you can get it with an okay goaltender, not one that's going to stand in your head, as long as your defensive structure is okay in front of you. But also, let's be real. There were some goals that, dare I say, were Husky-esque for that, like, give Huskies fans nightmares. Yeah. And again, you know, it's early. You kind of hope maybe it's jitters a little bit. It's a small sample size. I'm not too worried about it. I don't think Gophers fans should be just either.
Yeah.
Now, if we start seeing this pattern the next couple of weekends, then we might be a little bit more concerned. But I can't, after 2 games, I wouldn't be going too crazy yet.
Yeah, certainly not. Looking at a couple of other ones, I did chuckle. Of course, former colleague of yours, Nick Speliopoulos, was up. Of course, he's working up in Alaska where the Nanooks are in Fairbanks. And Fairbanks actually ended up being AIC 2-1 last night. And he posted on his story, if you know, you know. And I thought that was pretty humorous as well. Actually, looking around at a lot of the other scores, actually, most of the other ones do relate to the NCHC. But the other 2 I wanted, they're both Saturday night scores. The U.S. under-18 team beating Notre Dame by a score of 5-3. I think that's
interesting.
Notre Dame's going to be a decent team this year. North Dakota actually struggled with Manitoba a little bit in that matchup before getting the 5-1 victory as well. But that's NCHC-ish.
Right.
Let's talk about Wisconsin.
Yikes.
Yeah, against Lakehead. And we've talked a little bit about Mr. Granato there and seeing where he's going to end up. Is this one you told Gophers fans to take a chill pill? Should Badgers fans be a little more worried?
I think, well, the opposite is true. I think they should be worried about what sort of leash does Granato have. And he's been there for a while.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's kind of happened, though. Ever since the WCHA split, right, when Wisconsin was a team you definitely reckoned with, right? They were definitely a team that was up there in the conversation as one of the better teams in the country. They had a flash in the pan when they had Cole Caulfield. But the reality is they just haven't attracted the types of talent that, say, teams in the NCHC, teams in the Big Ten have done, other than what's, you know, so they're kind of getting outshined. And honestly, this may come as a surprise to people, but it's not just a hockey problem with Wisconsin. Their football team also, athletics as a whole, has taken a kind of a step back. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Noah, is I don't know if this is specific to hockey, but the Badgers athletics program is sort of a little bit under the fire. And with that being said, I don't know if I expect much of a change, which means, yes, you should be panicked. And this could be, I don't want to say ugly, but it could be an underwhelming season if that is just a sole precursor. But again, early, right? So you just kind of hope just things didn't go their way.
Yeah. Well, NCHC talk. It's been a long time since the Alaska Anchorage Seawolves have been back in action.
Yes.
Their Sunday night didn't go so well, but their Saturday night, they beat the Western Michigan Broncos by a score of 3-1. My girlfriend was at the game, and she talked about she kind of chuckled because she's like, "What? This Western Michigan team is way better than UAA." But I mean, UAA 3 goals on 11 shots. Nick,
yikes,
including a power play marker. Also, they lost 4-1 the next night. The Seawolves did, and it had a power play marker in that game as well too. So, Western Michigan, I think, is pretty obvious they're a good hockey team. But again, we talked about this in the entry to even St. Cloud and St. Thomas. Good goaltending or a team buy-in to block shots can really change things.
That, and you know, I think every hockey coach would tell you that the travel out to Alaska it's just like going and playing in Colorado and Denver, right? That is not a short trek. It definitely does make an impact on the traveling team. We both know Western Michigan's better than what they performed this weekend. I'm not taking anything away from the Seawolves by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, you're in a win, but you definitely wonder if they were feeling some of that, jet lag per se, making that trek. So I expect to bounce back next week for sure.
Certainly. A tie and a win against Ferris State from Miami, a 4-1 statement in their second game.
Bad.
Good to see them. A good little start.
Yes.
I don't really know that Ferris State is that strong this year, but you know what? You get the job done. I mean, it doesn't really matter who you're playing.
And I definitely have some more onto that when we talk about NCHC Media Day for sure.
Yeah. Certainly. Well, let's move over to Max Beach country. Duluth having a little bit of a handful, at least in night one, with ASU, who I think is going to be a good hockey team this year.
They are.
OT victory in the first game, and then 4-1 in the second one. Although I'm trying to remember, it was 4-1 stretch. Period number 2, 3 straight goals for the Dogs there to kind of pull away in that one. But Duluth. I mean, to be fair, geez, what is it? October. I mean, they've got 5 months before they really warm it up, right?
Right. Yeah. We know they only warm it up 2 weeks before they play the Huskies in the first round of the NCHC tournament.
Yeah,
that's the way how it goes. So
yeah, seriously. Let's move over to some other teams here. Nick, I think this is one that maybe surprised a lot of people, myself included. By the way, Denver beat UNLV 10-0. That's not the one I was talking about.
Exhibition for those wondering. Yes,
I say I'm a little surprised. Maybe it wasn't larger, I guess, if that was a surprise. North Dakota beat Manitoba 5-1. Omaha beat Minnesota State 7-2.
Yes, handedly.
Yeah.
Yikes. Now, again, this is also an exhibition game, I believe. So I don't think this was an actual non-conference. So this doesn't go against them, but
correct.
Not the best way if you're a Mavericks fan to sort of get the sour taste of losing to Denver in the NCAA championship game just a few months back. But again, give credit to Omaha. They've kind of been this teetering squad. Again, it's one game, but yikes that you would give up 7. That's never a good sign either.
Yeah, tough. Last team before we hit our own St. Cloud State Huskies. Nick, I'm excited about this one. So Air Force got on the board early in period number 1.
Yeah,
Colorado College scored 5 straight goals for a 5-1 victory.
Yes, they did.
Matthew Gleason had 2 goals. Noah Prokop, Ryan Beck, Tyler Coffey had a 2-point night for him. Noah Laba had 2 points as a freshman. Brian Yoon was on the board for an assist. Tell you what, Nick, not too shabby.
No, and Matthew Gleason, the former Cretin-Durham Hall product, up here again. He was the MVP of the game I called with Gino Parrish back in 2019, the high school all-star prospects game. He had a hat trick in that game, and he's not the biggest kid, but holy cow, he sees the ice well. He skates like a bat out of where, and when he gets time to risk the biscuit, as they say, he knows where to put it. So good to see him get a couple of goals. I know he was kind of struggling a little bit last year, finding some offense, but as we talked about this CC team, again, 1 game sample size, let's remember that, but early indications that their transformation continues to take place under Chris Mayotte, who I still think is a gem of a hockey coach.
I actually don't know where that bat was coming from. Can you enlighten us?
HE double hockey sticks. There you go.
Well, how about this? St. Thomas ran into a little bit of that themselves against our own St. Cloud State Huskies. A very good start.
Yes.
For those who listen to MNCAA, a certain well-known Huskies Warming House podcast, a certain somebody having to predict the score on Friday night. Who could it be? Who's to say? But
for those playing the home game, it wasn't me.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense because you're the host. But nonetheless, of course, that I keep saying Friday night. I'm gonna keep doing it. It's Saturday.
I know.
It's
so weird how that happens.
Sunday. You all know what I mean. But before we get to that, when St. Thomas hosted the St. Cloud Huskies, let's mention our 2 award recipients. Vieti Miettinen was forward of the week for the NCHC, and then defenseman of the week, Dylan Anhorn. God, did he impress this weekend?
He did.
Oh my goodness! And that's the thing is, like, when we were talking about our line charts, it was kind of interesting how some of our line charts were spot on, and then some of it, Ryan Roseborough was in on Sunday night. Good to see him jump in there. But again, I think this defensive core it's going to be a smorgasbord. Of course, we're going to get to obviously one of the changes that came from the first game for the Huskies on the back end as well too. But beyond that, they have options. St. Cloud just continues to demonstrate that with their lineup card, especially on the back end. So it's been very exciting. Let's talk about that Friday night game, Nick. Huskies win by a score of 3-1. Goals coming from Dylan Anhorn, who opened the scoring for the season for the Huskies, from Yami Kranola and Zach Okabe. No surprise in the assist column there already. Vieti Mietin with an assist, as well as Anhorn, his second point of the game, assisting on the second goal from Zach Okabe. What a great start from that top six on the forward side, too, just overall for the Huskies. Adam Ingram gets his first in a St. Cloud State uniform. Dylan Anhorn, another assist, 3-point night for him, and Vieti Mietin as well in that game. So, and then in the second, and those all came in the first period. And then the second period, it was St. Thomas striking back with one marker there, Nick. Let's talk about the difficult piece, just 6 minutes into that hockey game. Josh Lidke crashing headfirst into the boards, into the glass, taken off on a stretcher. It seems to be, from our initial reports from Brett Larson and company, that he is doing better. Tests were positive in the hospital. He is now on the road to recovery here. Don't have anything more in that. Not going to speculate on what's going on.
Right.
Seems to be, if anything, less physical ailment as far as like joints, muscles, things like that, from what it indicates. But that's all I can probably offer there. We're so stoked about him, and of course the season that he's getting ready to have. Again, we don't know the timetable, so hopefully he's back soon. But in the meantime, Nick, tough to see, and a tough little loss right now for St. Cloud.
It is, and I think we do need to address the elephant in the room here too, Noah, and that is the hit itself, right? It wasn't a bad hit. It's sometimes, and whether it's any sport, right? You get just one of those, I don't know, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it, a freak accident, but just things just sort of compound, right? Where one innocent thing turns into something a lot more than what we expect. And hockey's a collision sport, right? So it's interesting that we feel like either a hit here or a hit there, nefarious or non-nefarious, is that, you don't obviously wish for these things, but then when something doesn't seem like the input or the output should have came from the input, right? It just sort of takes you back a second. And I think that's what has really taken some people back on this situation.
And that's kind of the thing that, as we've gone, of course, you and I both playing the game and then getting to watch it too. I kind of remember a little bit a couple of years ago was Jack Ashawn, who went awkwardly into the end boards and stuff. A lot of those plays that end up being the tough ones are plays that are not hard and heavy plays. They're just awkward little plays that end up in the wrong spot there. Of course, did see a couple comments on social media about some sort of targeting or hitting from behind. I can tell you right now, I mean, especially knowing Rico Blasi as well too. I mean, players don't intend to do that. Players don't intend to hurt people, to have that end result be a thing. So maybe it's just me. And I mean, I get it. I mean, people are trying to be humorous, that sort of thing. It's just, to me, it's a little bit sickening, to honestly kind of assume that another team or anything would try to do something like that. I mean, come on, this isn't North Dakota and Ben Blood. But beyond that, all kidding aside, I mean, of course, it put a really big damper on the season early. But again, I think St. Cloud has demonstrated that they're going to be okay for the time being. I'm wishing the best for Josh. I mean, he's a sophomore. So, take your time, do what you got to do. If it takes a couple of weeks, it's going to be what it's going to be. If it takes a couple of months, it's going to be what it's going to be. We don't have a timetable. We don't have an answer, but really the priority is his health, because he has such a bright future and such a great hockey career ahead of him that you don't want it to detract. And for St. Cloud that night, it didn't detract for them as well. Jackson Castor, really nice start for him as well. So I mean, Huskies on Friday night on the road. Anything more you kind of want? That's nice.
Why does that happen? Jeez.
Yeah. You remember the episode that we did where I was wondering why we were hearing some feedback, and it turned out my phone had started playing music like halfway through the episode. But nonetheless, music to the ears of Huskies fans. Game number 1 against St. Thomas. Great win for them, right?
Very good win. And I was trying to look to see if there was any video of that hit that we could break down. I haven't seen
anything.
But I think I think the bigger thing is to suggest, and I get, certain, the instinct is, okay, this is my team. I'm all for my team. And that fandom was great. But to say that coaches and players are out to, sort of be the hit squad. And I get maybe that's the Vikings tremors for some Minnesota sports fans with the bounty gate, but that's not happening here.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It really is for Josh. But again, we talk about the positives, right? And that is, we talked about how there would be essentially good players that may be finding the bench because there is a crowded locker room on the defensive corps. Yeah, you don't ever want to be in this situation, but you do find yourself having the benefit of having good players that can step into your lineup, and you're never going to replace Josh Lidke, but to be able to give you quality minutes and to be able to make an impact on the game in their own unique ways. And so St. Cloud is in a good position to absorb his energy, his injury. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, my words are just escaping me, to the degree, whereas, you can feel confident going into the next time they play a couple of weeks from now, and to know that you're going to be solid in the defensive end. So this is, part of the reason why you got as many as you did, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. 23-11 shots were in that game. Faceoffs 33 for 53 for the Huskies. Only giving up 20 faceoff losses against something we talked about that was very important for those who are wondering. Adam Ingram 4 for 7 in his Huskies debut. Grant Cruikshank 15 for 20. Yeah, you love to see it. Yami Krannila was just under 15%, 8 for 17. Mason Sahlquist 6 for 9. Good to see him jump into that category as well. Let's move on to I keep saying Friday night. You know what I mean? The second game.
Sunday for those playing the home game.
Yeah, the one in the Granite City, that one. 4-0 victory for the Huskies. Vieti Miettinen opened the scoring from Dylan Anhorn once again. Grant Cruikshank as well getting on the board, and then also adding a tally just a couple of minutes later for his first in a St. Cloud State sweater. Micah Miller and Kyler Kupka, their first points of the season on an assist there. And then waiting till the third period for the other two. Yami Krannila, his first goal of the year from Vieti Miettinen and Dylan Anhorn. My goodness, what a great weekend for both those. And we talked about Vieti Miettinen, and I know at St. Thomas, they have 17 new bodies and that sort of thing. Doesn't matter. Playing the right way. This is exactly the start, maybe the conference boost that Vieti needs. And Dylan Anhorn, I think he's put himself in the lineup at least for the next weekend. On the back end, Spencer Meyer, his first of the year in his 5th season. Jack Peart and Yami Krannila tallying points. Jack Peart's first assist and point of the season as well. 2 power play goals in this hockey game, powering the Huskies as well. And on the individual side, of course, St. Cloud only giving up 15 shots against, having 38 for, only going 27 for 62 on the faceoff piece. Adam Ingram was 1 for 7 that night. Grant Cruikshank was 13 for 27, 8 for 17 again for Yami Krannila. Ryan Roseborough 3 for 7, and Kyler Kupka had 2 draws, and Chase Brand missed the only faceoff that he had. Goaltending wise, Dominic Bassi was in net for this one, had 14 total saves, and then there's, for whatever reason, there's a team save in there. I can't remember why that's listed the way that it is. Yeah, but nonetheless, St. Cloud, an even much better effort on home ice, their first victory at the Herberts National Hockey Center this season. Nick, this top 6 continues to get a really good start. We talked about how important it was for a guy like Grant Cruikshank to have a really good game early and feel comfortable, but Yami Krannila, Vieti Miettinen, Zach Okabe, Micah Miller, throw him in there, Kyler Kupka in the top 6. I tell you what, these guys doing the job, and on the bottom 6, not as productive, but hey, plus minus column doing exactly what you asked for. A little bit shakier in the faceoff circle on night number 2, which needs to be cleaned up, but signs pointing in the right direction overall.
For sure. And we talked about Dylan Anhorn too, and how kind of tying into that the Huskies, I think, really wanted more offense from the blue line. Dare I say, through 2 games, they're getting that from Dylan Anhorn. So
do we even need Nick Perbix? I mean, come on.
Right. They're all good signs, right? So, but again, it's the consistency piece. This is what killed the Huskies last season, is can they replicate this week in and week out, and dare I say game to game, right? That was sort of their Achilles heel, which really prevented them from really advancing in the standings. But it held them. It's not going to this season, I'll tell you that. The NCHC is at least what we believe are 6 teams deep. And so the importance of that consistency factor is going to be even more relevant, because you're going to have teams like Omaha, teams like CC, Western Michigan are going to be knocking on your door. And of course, you have your top 4, Denver, North Dakota, Duluth, and of course the Huskies, vying for that spot. So again, a lot of positive signs. It was the matchup we kind of thought we weren't going to get that 12-2 blowout. And then that 2-0, recaps a much closer affair on the scoreboard. Again, good for St. Thomas. Again, that shows again that they have indeed gotten better, which we expected them to be. You don't want to see those kind of blowouts. I know that even with the Miami series going back to last season, it just gets to a point where
it almost hurts St. Cloud.
It does. Yeah, it almost does. And so it's good competition. They get a week off. They get to a chance to rest, to get to go over some film, clean things up, as you mentioned, and be prepared for their next series. So, again, a lot of positive signs early. And again, that non-conference schedule we talked about, how important it is to get a good record from that to go into the conference play. Again, 2 games in, but good start so far.
Yeah, St. Cloud has a week to rest before traveling to Wisconsin, October 14th and 15th. We'll keep you updated on that one. Talking about getting better, Nick. Can't wait for this one. Durham West Junior Lightning on September 25th, a 5-1 victory for the Huskies. And then the box score. Nick, you were at both these games. A 5-0 victory on Friday. Truly on Friday, not like pretend Friday.
Right.
And then 3-2 on Saturday, a much tighter finish. On Friday night, Yanina Newland, her first of the season, quite obviously, from newly anointed captain Taylor Lind and Courtney Hall. Tatum Geyer scoring from McKenna Westlow and Taylor Lind. Taylor Lind adding a tally from Yanina Newland as well. 2 of them, actually, second one coming from Clara Himlerova and Allison Green. And then Emma Gentry's first of the year from Addie Scribner in game number 1. So, Nick, as I pull up the box score here for this, 17 shots for RPI on the other side, 31 shots for the St. Cloud State Huskies. You had JoJo Chobak in net, who had 17 saves to her credit.
Holy cow, does she look good. Holy
Nick,
cow.
You were there. That's the only intro I have. Run with it. What can Huskies fans take away, especially from that opening night on Friday?
So, of the last couple of seasons, Noah, we said, hey, we were just expecting at some spark. We knew that there was talent here.
Right.
We knew that they were capable of getting better. It just never happened. So they make a change at the top. They bring in Brian Adolski, who has been an architect of a couple of, shall we say, teams that were in a similar situation. Again, when he took over North Dakota back in 2007, 3, 4, 5 wins on the season. And then all of a sudden they're a perennial, within 4 or 5 years, are a perennial, not only WCHA competitor, but a perennial NCAA competitor.
He also followed us back on Twitter. So thanks, Brian. Appreciate
that's cool.
It. Yeah.
So, and at the end of it, the change was immediate that I saw. A couple of things that really stood out to me. So mind you, for just full disclosure, call the games on Big Ten Plus. Thank you to SID Andrew Melro for giving me that opportunity to come back and to call those games. It was a lot of fun to be back at the Herb. Smaller tangents, but the video board's awesome. Sound still needs help. We'll just put it that way. There needs to be some right. The volume is there, but the tuning, it's a tin box. They still need some acoustic paneling and some different tuning mechanisms. Yeah, but it's better.
Just a new ring, right? I mean, just drop a couple of dollars and
right. But the video boards are freaking awesome. I'll say that much. But this team was hungry on the puck. This team had options. They had puck support in all 3 zones. It just felt like at times one of the biggest frustrations watching the women's hockey team was it felt like it was. I know that the old hockey cliche, the puck was a grenade on their stick. It kind of truly felt that way sometimes, where they just didn't feel like they knew where their options were when they had the puck, right? I got the sense that not only was there one option and they knew it, but there were multiple options. So much better. Also, the puck possession was so much better. They were much cleaner exiting the zone. They were much better in terms of not forcing shots, much better puck movement on the power play. Their penalty kill, which mind you, 77.7% last season, was a perfect this entire weekend against RPI. So Also going, was it 3 for 5 or 3 for 5, I think, on the power play. So they look different. And I did very briefly stop and talk to graduate defenseman McKenna Westlogan, a good friend of the podcast, and just asked her, what you could see the smile. She's like, I really, really like where this team is going. And granted, again, one weekend, but the Huskies put up 5 goals on Friday. They didn't do that a single time last season at all. They scored 6 times, but never 5. Also, kind of fun fact, they've never had an opening night shutout since 2008, and that was a 7-0 drubbing of Quinnipiac. So going back almost 14 seasons. I think
I was like 9.
Yeah, you
or
were
something.
You were a teardrop at that point.
Something that'll bring a tear to your eye. The second night, of course, Sonia Hola back in net. Of course, Huskies carrying 4 goaltenders this season, by the way. Another thing to point out, 26 saves.
Should be 3.
4 listed here. Yeah, well,
interesting.
Yeah, Nick didn't put on his glasses for the game. It's fine.
No, I didn't.
26 saves on 28 shots against for Sonia Hola night number 2. 24 shots for the Huskies in a 3-2 victory on that one. Nick, you mentioned the power play specialty, by the way. On that Friday night, Huskies were 2 for 3. And then on Saturday night, they were also I believe 2 for 3. Yep, 2 for 3 on both nights. So they were 4 for 6.
4 for 6. Okay.
Which is fantastic. Here's the thing, and you talk about Brian Adolski and what he brings to this group, and it is so exciting to see them return to form at least, and of course, seemingly getting better. They're going to have their big test this weekend against Ohio State Friday and Saturday, so that'll be interesting. Not only with Brian Adolski, the work that Janelle Sergey, and of course, even throw Molly Engstrom in there as well. On the recruiting side, if you walk into, for example, Janelle's office, you see the recruiting board. And of course, we were down there back in 2019-20. I mean, that's when we were there. That recruiting board was pushed out as far as it could go, like 2025, right? So now they're probably even 2027, 2028. They have their radar up looking for good players. And of course, with Janelle and Molly, both former U.S. Olympians, and then Brian Adolski, of course, coaching the Chinese women's team as well, too. That experience, you can tell that it's making a change right away. And like I said, I believe that Brian and Janelle and their new coaching game plan and strategy has been effective from the get-go. But I also think the addition of players that Janelle has worked at to try to get them to this university, when, let's be fair, St. Cloud really struggled in past years in certain moments. And it's hard to say, oh, do you want to come to St. Cloud, who finished 7th in the WCHA, or do you want to go to Duluth, who finished 4th and went to a national tournament a couple years ago, right? So, I think that's a big change for this women's team. Nick, I want your prediction before we move on to some Minnesota Wild pieces here. Just a little tangent about the Wild preseason. This women's team faces Ohio State next weekend. You haven't gotten a chance to see them. How do you think they're going to fare?
I think it's going to be closer than people think. I really do. I still expect Ohio State to maybe gather one, if not both victories. But I think in the past, for Huskies fans and for the women's squad, it was easy to sort of look at that opponent, those good opponents, when Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio State, can go, okay,
right, this
is going to spell trouble. Even last season, Noah, there were times where, and this is, I think, sort of the downfall of the previous regime, was they had games where if they maybe just didn't panic or shot themselves in the foot, they may have come away with some more victories, right? There was some good signs there. Now I feel like with the way they're playing the game, now granted, this is still early, they're going to pose a much bigger threat to these so-called established powerhouses than I think they're ready for. I do think that the women actually do have a chance to split this series. I really, really do. And you talk about players that stood out. Jojo Chobak was really, really good. The transfer goaltender from Duluth, super solid in net, but my gosh, Taylor Lind
has been a great strong point for St. Cloud in recent years, has been the goaltending position, by the way.
It has been. They just haven't had the complement of players in front of them, honestly.
And you mentioned Taylor Lind. How about her transition from when we saw her as a freshman, and she was someone who really didn't feel like she had the puck on a string, was maybe a little bit timid and underconfident in the way that she plays the game. And like, you would have no idea watching her play the game.
No. Brian Adolski even made a comment about Taylor Lind, in fact, saying that that's the player that we want to recruit to play for St. Cloud. I will tell you this, in years past, watching St. Cloud Women's, and this is no disrespect anybody that's worn that sweater, but, players that, had a complete game, that really, you could just look at it and say, wow, this is an impact player. Taylor Lynn this last weekend was that impact player. She was phenomenal in terms of in every zone on the ice too. She just all over the puck. She was disrupting shorthanded. And holy cow, if you want to talk about small tangents, St. Cloud, as far as shorthand, they were up ice. They were challenging puck carriers, even dare I say, deep into the offensive zone. They were basically playing like a 1-1-2 and just kind of rotating the top two forwards. And there was just RPA has no idea how to handle it. And I think there's going to be a lot of confidence taken from that. I really do. But Taylor Lynn, my goodness gracious. You talk about a player that came in timid, shy, had all the tools in the tool bag, just maybe didn't know how to utilize them. Is now sort of, the graduate surgeon who's now teaching everybody else. She is right. She is, she's precise. She is confident. And man, she executes, and she's fun to watch.
Yeah, certainly fun to watch. And speaking of watching, go to some St. Cloud State women's game. The attendance still a little bit sparse, especially for people who I know were in the Granite City. Dude, you got to go and watch this team, especially they are on the rise. Get in the Herberts National Hockey Center and support them like we do the men. There's no excuse to not support them because they are a fantastic group of people to be around, and wishing them the best as we pay attention to their action this weekend. Final topic in the main portion of the show very quickly here, Nick. The Minnesota Wild, first week of preseason underway, and I would say it has gone pretty well for Minnesota. For those who are curious, 3-2 overtime victory on the 25th against Colorado, 5-2 victory on the 27th, 5-2 victory in Dallas on the 29th, and then that exhibition game preseason in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 3-0 victory for Minnesota.
Sold out.
Yes.
Fiserv Arena. That was cool. That was cool. It's too bad that Milwaukee / Green Bay isn't a bigger media market, because my goodness, was that draw fun. I've always wondered why Wisconsin did pro hockey, and if, dare I say, the media market was close to Arizona, that's where the Coyotes would be. There's no question about it.
Yeah, certainly. Minnesota starting off the season, Kirill Kaprizov and Marco Rossi, both 2-point nights in that opener. Kalen Addison with a goal, Ryan Hartman the game winner in overtime, Matt Dumba with an assist. Second game, it was the Tyson Jost show. Had 2 goals in that game. Sam Steele assisted on both of them, as did Matt Boldy on both of those tallies. And then Brandon Duhaime from Andre Suster's first in a Minnesota Wild sweater. Connor Dewar with a point as well. Alex Goligoski, Nick Patan getting a goal and an assist. And then Vladislav Firstov scoring in that game as well. Game against Dallas, Marco Rossi's first goal in the preseason from Mason Shaw and Kalen Addison. Matt Zuccarello on the board from Nick Patan's second assist of the preseason. Tyson Jost had an apple in that one as well. Marco Rossi, an assist in this game. Tyson Jost, an assist. Jonas Brodin scoring, as did Jared Spurgeon. Shaw's second assist. Brodin, another assist. And then Sam Steele, again, continuing to produce another goal for him. Tyson Jost, another assist. Tyson Jost is like a guy who literally might be in the top 6 unless he continues to have this type of chemistry with Sam Steele, because it's been impressive. Andre Suster, a point in that one. And then finally, the last 3 goals here, Nick. Connor Dewar, Matt Boldy, Brandon Duhaime, and then Ryan Hartman and Dewar with assists in that game in Milwaukee against Chicago. So for those who are curious, Nick, tomorrow or today, whenever this show comes out, Tuesday, October 4th, St. Louis. They're in St. Louis, then at home against Chicago on Thursday, at home against Dallas on that Saturday. And that is it for the preseason. And then we wait till Thursday, October 13th, home and season opener against the New York Rangers. Nick, pretty obvious. There's some kids that are vying for a spot that are certainly holding on to that position with pizzazz, one of them being a certain guy by the name of Marco Rossi.
It's funny how we go through the score and this and that, and those are all great, but I'm going to shut down your analytics mouth here for a second. Right. Because I know that's the one thing you got, but here's the thing though. There is some importance to that. And when you talk about preseason and you're looking for the guys such like Marco, you're looking guys like Kalen Addison, Sam Steele, Nick Patan, I think is actually impressed too. Actually. But you're looking to see, okay, the guys with the doors open for them, are they taking it? They are 100%. Rossi, not only did he not look out of place, but it looked like he looked comfortable.
Yeah, he
looked like he belonged. Kalen Addison, same thing. Dare I say Andre Schuster in his limited role also looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I like the way Schuster, like Pecan, looks good.
So what they say, or what the rumor always is every year, is that the last week, the last couple of games is when teams and players start trying. And the final tune-up game, is there anybody that we felt in our prediction last week for our lines? Is there anybody that you feel has fallen out of favor to make this Minnesota Wild lineup? And is there anybody that we didn't mention in that big club echelon that you feel like Nick Petan is someone you mentioned? Is there anybody else that you feel has made enough of a case that it's like, oh boy, they might have to keep this guy around a little bit here? I
think the one name that we mentioned last week, because his name circulated all last year, Adam Beckman has kind of fallen, I think, out of favor. And we're starting to kind of get a glimpse as to maybe why he was sent down last year. Again, it's year to year, just like anybody else, you have chances to improve, but it's funny because it goes two ways, right? For an athlete, it's what's your individual, situation look like, and more so, does somebody else's development and their role, do they just outshine you? I think it's a little bit of both. I think Beckman is sort of undershined for himself, but I also feel like guys like Nick Petan as a depth role has actually looked pretty good. The addition of Sam Steele, you mentioned, their chemistry, right?
Sam Steele could be the pickup of the offseason for the Wild.
He could be. He really could be. And sometimes it's just based on need and just situation and kind of the fit, right? And to me, I think there's your answer. I think Beckman has sort of slid down, and I think guys like Petan and Sam Steele sort of prove, and Bill Guerin, that, these are kind of depth pickup roles, but at least early on, and granted it's preseason and it's not a total, say look into the prism, but so far from what we've seen, it looks like that's where things are trending. And then when Jordan Greenway gets healthy, depending on that timing, maybe some different decisions, but right now that's kind of how I see it. Did you see it any differently than I did?
No, I think that's a really good assessment. I just wanted to see, there's one player that I'm forgetting, because I gotta be honest, the name doesn't come to me, but he's very good at punching people in the face, and I'm trying to remember who that is.
Oh yeah. And what was that defenseman that we traded to Toronto for a 7th round pick and everybody was pissed off about last year?
Oh gosh, Braden, somebody. See, that's the thing. I don't even remember.
I know. Well, it's funny because he never made it to the NHL with Toronto, and if I remember correctly, he kind of underwhelmed too with the Marlies. I'm gonna find that because that's gonna.
Yeah. let me see. I think it was in Colorado is where this fight happened. So I'm looking for the recap. I'm looking for the box score and
is that penalties. Where the linesman also took a shot?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, not Brandon Baddock. That's what I'm thinking of.
Baddock. Okay.
Yeah. Likes to punch people in the face. We love it. But nonetheless, I mean, I think Minnesota, in a pretty decent little spot. They've got options here. They've got a lot of guys vying for spots. It's a very competitive roster. It doesn't feel like it's been locked in, so to speak.
Brennan Minnell. That's who it was.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that guy. Beyond that, speaking of that guy, the guy is going to be Nick Maxon. He's going to inform us here. Extra ice session. We're going to head over NCHC Media Day. NCHC Media Day. Let's try that again.
Maybe I need to host next week.
Yeah, mic check 1 2 1 3. Are you receiving? But nonetheless, the message has been sent, and we're going to hear all about those messages here in the extra ice session. And welcome into the extra ice session. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant. Nick, don't laugh. I know you want to laugh.
If I do, it's only because I'm looking at myself in the rear, in the camera, but that's fine.
In the rear view mirror, yeah, that's a. Don't be laughing when you're looking in the rear view mirror. That's
there's some interesting symmetry to that. If you're looking in the room, that means I'm leaving myself behind. Is that what that?
Yeah, when you hear the rumble, when you hear the rumble strips, bring it back to center, okay?
Got it. Okay.
With that being said, rumbling down the highway here, NCHC Media Day, we're taking the U-turn backwards in time. Okay, enough with the road puns here, Noah. But again, why don't we go from the back end up, Nick? I'm kind of let you have the reins. Just kind of get tee up for each team. Maybe we'll go with our preview order.
Yeah.
Miami. Let's start with them. They got their big victory against Ferris State this weekend. Didn't look totally out of place as far as that is concerned. Chris Bergeron has been on the pseudo hot seat technically for a while, I guess, just with that program, and they're in kind of a weird spot.
Weird spot's probably the best way to phrase it. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you anticipate from the season? And is this team going to be more than Ludwig Pearson on ice?
They are actually going to be this year. And you know, it was interesting talking to Miami because, you know, there are certain times, Noah, where, well, what's the best way to phrase this? Where you get sort of that honesty that you always want, but you know, or at least you anticipate you never will get.
Yeah.
And let's just say there was some honesty with Miami that I certainly wasn't anticipating with Media Day.
Right.
So, you know, you sit down with these guys and you sort of, you know, try to, dare I say, you know, you ask him some questions you kind of get, but then you kind of, you know, get at him a little bit. Right.
Right.
I think what's important to understand here is that Miami knows, and to the captain that I talked to, they're well aware that where they're at, and even more so. And I think this is where I actually earned a lot of respect. I'm trying to pull up the gentleman's name that got it to me, but just simply ask their captain, effectively, what do you expect out of the season? And, you know, what's, you know, how do you guys, you know, take something that has been not fun and try to turn the corner? And quite frankly, gave me the answer of, well, we just didn't have the locker room. Quite literally said it verbatim. And then he went on to say that those guys are basically gone. He feels like that, you know, he had a voice, but it wasn't really reverberated. It feels like now that the locker room is his, then he actually then kind of said, now the locker room is kind of ours, and they feel more cohesive. So if that is truly the case, and there was some maybe the not the right pieces there, I think that's the best way to phrase it, right? Dare we say this team? I don't think they're going to surprise people, but I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be more competitive because of last year, without sounding disrespectful, they were bad. And to the point where I think they're, especially during the St. Cloud series, again, it was not fun hockey to watch, even though as Huskies fans, you're on the better end of that. It's still, when you look at those kind of games, you just look at a team that just doesn't even seem engaged and just sort of bent to the will. You know, you hope those days are behind Miami, or you really do. You never wish a team to kind of put on that kind of performance.
It's interesting. Senior defenseman Jack Clement is the is the captain this season. Interesting thing. Number one, I love reading on their website because Miami unfortunately doesn't get a lot of victory. I love it. The title for Sunday's win: Miami rips Ferris State 4-1. I love it. But with that being said, Nick, in relation to another NCHC team, you remember who the captain last year for the Redhawks was?
It was a guy who's now on the UMD Bulldogs. It's Derek Dashke.
Derek Dashke. Interesting. Something to note. Final question about Miami here, Nick. Is there zero pressure for these guys? Can they maybe play a little bit easier knowing that there's no real expectation for them?
I think you can. But also to the same juncture, you know, there's going to be internal pressure too, right? Because you do, especially if you have a locker room that says, hey, we can do things. We can do things now. We're positive. I think there's internal pressure there too, right? There's external, internal pressure. So you hope that they take the approach that is, we have nothing to play for. Maybe they do, right? Because athletes, even when you're on a team that doesn't have the same accolade as North Dakota or whatnot, you know, they still want to advance in their pro career. So they want to make some type of impression. They want to go play pro hockey, right? Well, would you do it?
Last time I checked, Miami is 1-0-1 this season. Like,
So you know, when you look at it, really they're going to be their biggest enemies because, you know, you can let that pressure of feeling like you have a higher ceiling get to you, or like you said, you can kind of just take it one game at a time and say, you know what, this is going to be, you know, we're not going to flip the ship upside down in 1 year. That's not going to happen, but we can certainly establish, you know, a higher bar and then build from there. Right. And so I think as long as they keep that loose minded approach, they'll be better. Certainly in as long as indeed what they tell us and what was so very honestly spoken about was if they have some of those pieces that were maybe a hindrance, maybe that's the best way to phrase it, gone, whether for whatever reason, it should translate to better results. And you kind of hope to see it, honestly.
I don't know if I don't know if you've seen The Last Dance, but Omaha coming in at number 7 took that personally.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, what a great showing against Minnesota State. Did you get a sense from the NCHC media day that this was a team that felt like they were ready to kind of strike back at the predictions a little bit?
Uh, a little bit, because I think Omaha feels the same way that we kind of feel about them, which is they have the talent and the coach, Gavin. That again, you talk about a fantastic human being, Gavin. It's one of them. I think he felt like, they kind of took a page out of Denver's book a little bit last year, where he talked about being cohesive. And he talked about, all being on the same page and executing and just the smaller details, right? And I think Omaha knows that, kind of what everybody else in the NCHC knows, that non-conference schedule sets you up in terms of your momentum, quote unquote, your confidence to get to conference play. And if you're on a good train rolling, then that really does kind of help you set up. So I know they're looking at the non-conference schedule as we need to get ourselves out in the right foot. And that's one way to make a statement. That certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. Omaha's a very curious case here. Maybe we'll cruise through a couple more here. Our next favorites, the Colorado College Tigers. We've talked a little bit about Brian Yoon and what they believe and believing in this group. But beyond that, what from Brian's team is the expectation? Because we know that they believe in that locker room.
Yes,
we know that they feel that they're on the rise. But did you ever get a sense for them feeling like there was almost an expectation that they should be pushing for a home ice spot? I mean, kind of how did they feel?
I don't think they look at it as a home ice spot, but I do feel like, in the words of Chris Mann, I'll start with him, is, he takes it back to the opening of Ed Robeson Arena in terms of, beforehand, even going to practice, it was like driving across town. It was like going to work almost. Now he's like, we feel at home now. And, these guys can walk from their dorms or their, student apartments, and they can walk there and they can work out whenever they want. They can get the ice surface, whenever they want. And he talked about how now they feel like they kind of just have a home, and just what the impact that's had. I think really, truly, and mind you, Chris Mann, he was very relaxed, very, very confident. And for Brian, go to him just to kind of wrap up CC. There's a buzz. There's 100% a buzz, and number two, to kind of end that in the team. I think they expect to be better, and if again small samples, it shows that I think they do believe it. And again, I think this is overlooked too. They went from an Olympic sheet down to an NHL sheet, and I do think that is going to help them in terms of mold them into a more of that new modern NHL style, getting away from the old like Haviland, just sit back and trap and not attack. This Tiger team, no pun intended, is ready to pounce. They really are, and I'm here all week. But truthfully, I really truly feel that CC, with their brand new unis, which are sweet
disgusting.
Looking. They're disgustingly good. I think they're going to look just as good playing the game in terms of on the ice. They look good. I'll tell you.
We did get a look at the Sox, by the way. Exactly what we had kind of thought. Kind of a flip of the shoulders. Having the black striping all the way down to the bottom a little bit. They look good. And hopefully they look good on the ice, like you mentioned as well too. Fifth place spot. Not looking so good to start. 1-1 here. Maybe not the result they were looking for, but hey, a lot of time to turn that around. Of course, the Broncos, probably the most curious case in the NCHC, TBH.
I'm not sure if they're as much of a curious case as we're giving them credit for. You got to remember, under Pat Firstweiler, they make their first ever NCAA tournament. They get their first ever NCAA tournament win. But here's a funny story. So Pat Firstweiler, I didn't know he was this freaking hilarious. They were talking about a new horse statue, right? And apparently the horse head, so however you want to orientate in your head. So heads, let's say this, it's heads on the left-hand side and the tails to the right. Apparently this horse is facing east, and apparently Firstweiler picked up on this and said, well, why the hell is this thing facing west? You spend $3-4 million on a horse and you can't even get the freaking direction right. So anyway, that was sort of his little tidbit to break the ice with us, in our little 15 to 20 minute sessions.
Is that why the start of their season's direction went a little bit?
Maybe there's some terrible foreshadowing there from the bronze statue, but it was pretty funny. There's a different energy with Firstweiler. Was cracking a lot of jokes with us media. Players felt very relaxed. Western feels like a team that also feels confident. Again, they're wanting to build off of, something the program has never done before. So I feel like they're well positioned to do it. Again, how do you respond, right? So how do you you kind of came back from a tough Alaska trip? I get it. We talked about that earlier, but I think they're going to be fine. Again, I think when the conference play comes around, they're going to be just fine. And under Fat Firstweiler's leadership, they'll be doing okay.
Yeah, well, he's got to be a funny guy. He doesn't have any hair, right? He's got to do something.
Oh boy,
you think he lost all the hair from the stress of playing hockey, though? Who's to say?
Helmet hair, I don't know. So
yeah,
all in the helmet.
I know another certain somebody who doesn't have hair. That is head coach of the men's hockey team for St. Cloud, Brett Larson. Huskies fans certainly curious to hear about this one. Give us the rundown, man. What does Brett have to say about the hometown club?
So a couple of things. We asked him about the defensive core, and that's when he was lauding, unfortunately now injured Josh Lidke, and how he was going to be matched up with the opposing players' top offensive talent. He said Josh kind of shined offensively toward the end of the season, but he also mentioned that his defensive play is very underrated, is what he sort of alluded to, and that they were going to have to make very tough decisions night in and night out on the D-core as the season rolls on. And then going to the offensive side of the puck, I asked him, are you excited for these young, highly touted kids? And he goes, well, yeah, but what we're looking for is how do we get a few more from everybody? So we talked about Vidi. We talked about Yami, talking guys like Mike Miller. Can we get 2 to 5 goals more out of these guys? Because we're going to have to do it by committee. If you think we're going to rely on these young rookies like Ingram McCoy, just to name a couple, to be the saviors and replace the offense we lost, it's not going to happen very realistically. Right. So he was sort of looking at that. And then goaltending, he echoed sort of the same things that we've been echoing here in the show, and that is James Gray is a lot better than people think. And he's pushing both Bassey as well as Castor in practices. And so dare we say that the depth is there? Yeah, the depth is there, right? It's something that we had mentioned over the last season, just didn't seem like it was there. And then talking to Captain Spencer Meyer, what a beauty he is, echoed the same thing. He's incredibly excited for the season. It feels like the new guys fit in really well. He said also of the young kids, very, very mature for their age. He's like, you expect a little bit of, the young sort of shenanigans and whatnot. It goes, which they have. But also when I came down to get to work, I do the captain's practices. He was like, there was no horsing around. They got to work. They wanted to learn the systems. They're very ready to be sponges. And so that was kind of neat to hear. So seems like things are looking up for SCSU this year.
Yeah, no horsing around. Heaven forbid that horse faces east. It's kind of St. Cloud's kind of interesting because they remind me they were so cohesive a couple of years ago during the national championship run. Yep. It almost reminds me of this machine with these set cogs. And then last year, you have most of those cogs that are there, but it felt like the machine hadn't been ran well in a while and wasn't oiled up. And now this year, it feels like somebody finally took the time to take some of those cogs out that were a little bit rusty, replace them with new ones that, even though they're new, are working really well. And this machine is starting to have some cohesion once again. So really excited for the St. Cloud season. One of their biggest matchups at number 3, the Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs, Scott Sandlin in his 23rd season. I'd imagine he either had some really great things to say or was just like, you know what, I've done a lot of these.
So a couple of things. Scott Sandlin wasn't there this year.
There you go.
It was the new assistant coach. And so for Duluth, I didn't get a ton of time with Minnesota Duluth, but with Tanner Latteru was the captain there.
Like I said, Scott Sandlin, I've done enough of these things.
I know, pretty much.
Is this because you attacked him like 2 years ago?
I didn't really attack him. I just gave him I gave him a question that he wasn't expecting. We'll put it to you that way. And it was on hairstyle, so put it to you that way. So he took it in stride, which is the way Scott Sandlin does it. So fun to see.
And now Nick's not allowed at NCHC Media Day anymore.
Right. But at the end of it, Duluth, they're confident. They didn't really, what do you call it? thwart or panic at the fact that they lost the biggest piece of their offseason success or their postseason success in Ryan Fanti.
Their
Again,
mascot.
Max enter the chat. Yes. But beyond the terrible costume change, what wasn't needed for a costume change was I think they were more disappointed that the regular season, they just didn't get it going as soon as they'd like it to.
Yeah.
They got it going at the right time. They acknowledge that, but they also feel like they left something on the table too in the NCAA tournament. So,
sure.
But excited again for the younger talent that's coming in. They do feel like, again, they're going to be right up there. They feel confident. We said that on the podcast too, both on this one and on NCAA, that they seem like they have a little bit of a different balance of look that we may see from them this year.
Good freshman class.
Very good freshman class. But again, they're young guys. How quickly do they gel? And again, more of a stress on the defensive side of the game first as the offensive guys get acclimated and get comfortable. So they're going to be relying on that seasoned veteran defensive core that they have, also to help out some younger goaltenders. They do have Zach Stace called, no question about it, but just trying to get that group acclimated to NCAA Division I level. They'll be fine.
Let's follow the NCHC polling results here. The second best team listed as far as the league media is concerned, the North Dakota Fighting Hawks. Of course, always in good hands with Brad Berry up there.
Yes.
Trying to retool on the fly. Does Brad feel confident in that?
100%. We know that Brad Berry, first of all, 2-time Penrose Coach of the Year award winner, right? I think, and I think, honestly, one thing that North Dakota, and I might gag when I say this, doesn't get enough credit for is just how good of a developing coaching staff North Dakota does have. I mean, honestly,
fans aside, their actual program, and minus their building, which obviously is a great addition.
Yes.
Their actual program it's disgusting. It's unreal.
It's good. So, and I think us hockey fans can at least acknowledge that.
Oh, for sure.
And a lot of that goes to, is it Dave Jackson, the assistant coach? Dane Jackson. Sorry.
Yep.
I keep calling him Dave. I'm sorry.
Kevin, Bobby. I don't know.
Right. But he's our skills coach. And you talk about, let's do a comparison. Marty St. Louis with Cole Caulfield, just maybe on the power play, Cole Caulfield was going for a one-timer, and instead of just shooting it off because he was committed to it, right into a kneecap, it doesn't go anywhere, right? Talks about faking it, then taking a step out, opening up that shooting lane, and then, firing a puck on net. It's those types of skill plays and just hockey IQ things that Dane Jackson teaches. And a big reason why that, even though you have already a good baseline of skill that North Dakota gets, you're still only as good as what you can do and develop on top of that, right? In North Dakota, with Barry Trotz. My gosh, Brad Berry.
Barry
Trotz, Nick. Am I losing my marbles? Yes, I am.
I don't think you had many left, but
I'm starting to wonder, seriously.
I love it.
But with Brad Berry and Dane Jackson and their coaching staff, they do a really good job of molding that really, shall we say, raw talent, that clay, into, shall we say, really good NHL talent too, because they produce a lot of top-end talent. So they're going to be fine. I know they know that there's going to be some bumps along the way. Again, they do have a larger freshman class, and also some transfers coming in. But again, they're confident. I'm confident. We've put them at our poll number one because we know that they can gel quickly. They know that they can play the North Dakota Fighting Hawk hockey brand pretty quickly, and so they'll be okay. And Brad's comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, let's trot on down the road to the final team in the NCHC, the defending national champion Denver Pioneers, David Carl.
I always really enjoy talking with David Carl, just because he's just blunt and honest with you about it. There was a guy that they want number 10. Honestly, you would think that would be a distraction for them. And it may end up being that way. But they want to be the first program to get to 10 NCAA championships. It's a goal they have. And with Dave Carl, which, mind you, for those who know him in person, at least with the media, he doesn't show a ton of emotion. And here he's all business, and he was all business at media day. He is very proud of what they accomplished. But similar to what we heard with Brett Larson and to others, it's that, hey, that book is closed. That chapter's done. Yeah. And this is a fresh, clean slate, not only for us, but also our competition. And we have now a target on our back. And so not only do we have to replicate it's successful, but we have to also be better. And so I don't expect Denver to miss a beat. And dare they say, I mean, they attracted guys from the Gophers to transfer in, like Tristan Bros. They're loaded. We'll put you that way. They're loaded. They're primed for a repeat. And really the only way that, similar to, I hate to call for St. Cloud, is that they're kind of their own Achilles heel if they make it out to be. But this team is dialed in. This team is tuned in. They understand what it takes to get there and to actually accomplish it. And David Carl is their guy that no question is going to be behind the bench steering that club in the right direction.
For those who are wondering, NCHC action, like we mentioned, St. Cloud is off next weekend. Denver will host Notre Dame, at least on that Friday night. Miami will travel to UMass Lowell. Omaha will host Niagara. North Dakota will host Holy Cross. And Colorado College will host Alaska Anchorage. I believe Western Michigan is off from what it looks like as well. So Western and St. Cloud will be off. Let me see if I notice any quick changes very quickly. Western has Ferris State on Saturday, October 8th. And then it looks like whoever was playing UMass Lowell, that was, I can't remember who it was, Miami. They do have them on Saturday as well. UMass Lowell has 3 games in a row from what it looks like. Kind of
those darn East teams.
Yeah. I don't know if Michigan is playing. I don't think they are.
Well, if it's Western Michigan on the schedule, then no, they're not playing.
Yeah. But nonetheless, speaking of heading out in general directions, like we mentioned, men's hockey is off. Following weekend, they will have Wisconsin in Wisconsin, October 14th and 15th. Women's hockey headed to Ohio this weekend, October 7th and 8th.
Buckeyes.
Yep. Minnesota Wild, 3 preseason games left, the last one being this upcoming Saturday. And then they wait till the following Thursday, home and season opener against the New York Rangers. Nick, I think that's going to do it. So for Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the den.
Here, one-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.